Welcome to Karate Cafe, your source for martial arts conversation since 2005. And now, here's your hosts, Paul Wilson and Dan Williams.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another live Facebook event. Let's call it
Thing.
that thing. Here in the massive Karate Cafe studio. I'm Paul Wilson. As ever, just off to my center line is my good friend, Dan Williams. Dan, how are you?
I'm well. I'm doing well. I've moved into Rick and Morty's garage.
I
Um,
noticed that.
so yeah, things
Hard
are
times. Hard
it's,
times. Living in the
I don't
garage.
know. I don't know.
It's
Like it's a
okay.
pretty cool garage to be in. So
Yeah. Well, hey, the way I look at it is you may be living in the garage, but
mhm.
we have had some really good response to
We
kind of getting
have.
back on the horse, as it
Yeah.
were. I'm super happy with that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we're doing the format. We've had some people like reach out and like, hey, what are you doing? Uh, we will, or the way I'm seeing it, and Dan, you can weigh in on your particular vision of what's going on. Is maybe we'll do these live ones maybe every week or every other week or whatever. We'll still do regular, just Dan and I
hmm
shooting the poop on our own kind of thing. Maybe get some people in. Maybe grab some of you. Yeah, it's you. And
Absolutely.
into to chit chat. Once we kind of get our feet underneath and get some of the rest off and whatnot. But I like this live one because I'm hoping that maybe since this is on the early afternoon, especially on a Friday,
Yeah.
maybe we'll get a few people streaming and throwing comments in. But if you're watching this on the rerun, just remember you can comment and put stuff in. Give us your thoughts after that
Yeah.
because this is where the conversation starts.
Yeah, it's a new format for us. We haven't really done the live streaming on Facebook, but it seems to be relatively simple for our workflow, our podcasting workflow, and we can download the video afterwards, and we can have conversations with people in real time. And really, that's all we're doing. I mean, um, I think we both have some expertise, but at the same time, I've always seen this, and I think the Karate Cafe founders and all that jazz have always seen this as just like martial artists having conversations. And there is for those of you that have been around a while, there's always what I call dojo talk, right? Like after class, you start chit-chatting about this, that, or the other thing. And that's kind of what this is. It's just like after class dojo talk where you chat about
Totally.
martial arts in general or your style or whatever the case might be, And
Yeah,
it's just a
it's that guy, the
right.
guy who never washes his
Yeah,
gi, the guy that hits
right.
too hard,
Right.
whatever,
Yeah.
or how's going on? Hey, we got let's see, we got my good
Oh,
friends Kyle and Randall.
what?
Yep, popping in. Hey guys, what's up? Feel free to weigh in. Yeah, we anyway, we're so I guess maybe the plan for these are to have a nice little tight topic
hmm
and keep it to 30 minutes
Yeah. Good luck with
for
that.
anyone who's in a lunch or maybe just kind of catching it on their break at
hmm
uh, at work or whatever. And so we're trying to actually focus it with a topic, and we posted the topic. And Dan, that since this comes from you, why don't you share?
Yeah. What's the topic we posted? I don't know. We talked about a bunch of them.
This one would be dynamic entry.
Oh, dynamic entry. Yes. So, in a couple of the arts that I have practiced, one being Silat, well, three, I guess, Silat, Arnis, and Wing Chun, is that there are some drills that allow us to practice what I call dynamic entries, right? So we've all we've all done the static entry where your uke, your opponent performs a strike, a kick, a grab, or something like that, and then you perform the counter to that. Um, but it's delivered in a somewhat static way. You kind of know when it's coming. And I think that's great for learning, right? That is really good for learning your basic technique, learning distance, which is real critical, learning timing, things like that. But I think that you can you can level that up if you do a dynamic entry. So if you do even not even like a sparring situation, but with Wing Chun, for example, we have the Chi Sao, which is people may have seen the rolling hands back and forth, where as your as you and your uke are in motion, your uke would perform an unplanned attack, if it were, right? And then you simply have to flow into defending that as opposed to, okay, I'm going to strike now. And I think kind of what I see, I have not seen that in a lot of other martial arts. Now, I don't have super extensive experience, but I've not really seen that in Aikido. I have not seen that in karate. My very limited access to karate. I've not seen that
despite my
in,
best efforts.
despite your best efforts. I did take it for about 6 months. Um,
And that's the problem. You took it instead of studying it, right? And
see, uh, uh, but yeah, I think that for people and or arts and or schools, right? Because it may be part of the system, but maybe the school doesn't teach it this way. I think that can be something potentially that's a valuable um, teaching technique that you could incorporate. And whether that means like two people kind of stalking around each other and then randomly executing a technique without like a countdown or anything like that. Um, and obviously you want to be careful with it, right? Because if the person misses the counter, this is probably not something for beginners necessarily, like beginners. Um, but it is a way to sort of approach the total free form of sparring. Um, in an intermediate step between like one steps and sparring, where you get sort of a what I call a dynamic entry, if you will, or a dynamic exercise. Yet you're still in that sort of coach-student relationship of the uke and the student, where the uke is essentially the coach of the student, right? You're helping that person learn.
Mhm.
Um, and you can adjust your pressure, you can adjust your speed, you can make a lot of fine-tuned adjustments where you make sure you don't push them into like panic mode
Mhm.
because they're not learning anymore when they're in that mode, right? If I think sometimes if you put somebody that has only done say one steps, we'll call them, and then you drop them into sparring, it induces that panic mode, right? Because it's such a large gap between those two things where people will say, I don't even feel like I'm using the techniques that I've studied when I spar,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because they're just going, and they're back on their heels almost immediately.
Right.
And then sort of you have to teach them sparring on top
Mhm.
of teaching when really they should kind of already know that, kind of. But again, it helps with that transitional phase. And I think too, in talking about this, one of the things that we've talked about before, and maybe this is a topic for another time, but as part of any system, there's so much more than just the techniques that that system contains. There's the there's the structure of teaching the system. There are drills and or practices within a system. There's all of
Mhm.
those things that makes the teaching process efficient and effective, not just the actual martial art efficient and effective. So
Right.
yeah, I don't know if you've experienced. I know that you've experienced like our niece and a couple other things like that. And I guess what's the Karate Man's perspective?
Well, there's quite and as Kyle pointed out, that uh, Kakadamishi Sayers, which is what his term for this, or
Okay.
a Japanese term for that, very similar drills to the contact sticky drills in Wing Chun. Yeah, because as we all know, everything from was stolen from the Okinawan, so we came up with it first.
Of
Um,
course.
but um, but I digress. Yeah, that's as we were talking in the green room last week. One of the things about talking about pressure testing. There's a
Yeah.
whole, the reality-based self-defense guys and the sort of born again, practical karate people and stuff like
Hmm.
that are all talking about pressure. You got a pressure test. You got a pressure test.
Right.
It's like, well, but you're never ever really going to be able to pressure test. You can approach reality and you can approach, but everything is in context, right? So,
Right.
um, uh, I think what you're talking about is something that I encourage and actually last night in class, it's one of the things we touched on was sort of allowing for some improv and
Mm.
allowing for uh, because you never know what's going to happen, right? So when you're doing like for us, and again, this is going to be one of those times where I really wish I had the two
Yeah,
cameras,
I
but
know,
we
right?
haven't got that going on yet. But is coming in is one of my students was talking about. I was showing him a drill, and it's like, okay, but it makes more sense to do this. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, within the context of this is what we're doing, because you don't know how far the person is, because there's gonna be relative motion. You don't know
Right.
how far they're gonna, you know, everyone is gonna attack you like this. Ha, ha,
Right.
and
Exactly.
everyone's gonna attack you like that.
Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, they may be fainting and doing that. They may
Right.
close in. They may whatever. You're gonna close in. There's gonna be relative distance, relative velocity, all that stuff goes out. In Ippon Kumite, a lot of that stuff is taken out because you know exactly how they're going to attack you. And karate works really well when you know exactly how they're going to attack you. Here's a pro tip: every martial art works really well when you know how they're going to attack you. So when you keep everything in context, it's
Yeah.
like all these people go like, do this and do that and do that, and yeah, your technique looks awesome because you know what they're going to do.
Right.
Where it goes south is when you don't know what they're going to do. One of the things that I do is I really don't do a lot of toe-to-toe sparring with
Hmm.
people in classes. I do attack defense. Someone's attacking you and you're defending. Usually, what I'll start it out with is like, okay, they're going to come out and they're going to punch you. So
Right.
you know what's happening. They're going to punch you. Are they going to hang back and punch you? Are they going to push in and punch you? Are they going to
Hmm.
throw a hook? Are they going to throw an uppercut? Um, and what usually happens in this case uh, is like you mentioned, is like it goes out the window. It's like, where's all my cool techniques?
Right.
Where's all my, pressure point strikes? Where's all my,
Right.
train
Right.
tech? You fall back on the basics, which is
Yeah.
what it's going to be. You're going to block, you're going to punch, you're going to receive it, and you're going to block. By which case, you're going to hope you do something in the middle.
Right.
Are you going to do it that way? Are you going to do it that way? Are you going to do it
Right.
that way? Are you going to, like, I don't know.
Right.
Are you going to do it that way? It doesn't matter. Do something even if it's wrong, right?
Right.
And so,
Right.
because that's what it gets you doing
It's not
is
wrong if you don't get hit.
right,
Yeah.
or get hit less.
Right.
But bringing that sort of chaos into the thing, because everything's gonna go out the window. I don't care. I again, it falls back to my bugaboo about martial arts. We aren't training in martial arts. We're training in personal protection arts. If you're in the military, you're training in the martial arts, and you have a different
Right.
mindset and a different goal than you do when you're Joe Schmo on the cul-de-sac. So, um, but as instructors, I think one of the things, and martial artists in general kind of perpetuate your art. Where do you introduce that? How do you step it in like
Ippon
Ippon Kumite, block punch, block punch, block and punch, block punch counter. That
Hmm.
and then make it free form. It really throws things out in and as an instructor, you need to like let people know it's like demonstrating stuff. Not everything always works,
Yeah.
and so like if you're teaching somebody something and you're showing them, and then you catch one, it's not because your technique didn't work. It's generally because you're teaching somebody and you're not paying attention as well you would be in a situation. But you need to be ready for that. a perfect example was we were doing some wall drills with my students. So like, yeah, someone shoves you and you're up against the wall, and then they come in and start swinging, and so you have to do whatever you do to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so I did it with this student and I did it with that student, and I would do something and then we turn around and anyway, so one of my students came up and we lined up, and so she shoved me up against the wall, boom, and she came in with a punch, and so I covered up with my left because she was supposed to punch me with her right, but guess what?
Ah,
She's left-handed,
there you go.
so she shoved, boom, and came in with it, and so sure
Southpaw.
enough, because I was explaining like, okay,
Yep. Yep.
which I was like, okay, now I have to
Yeah.
think about. And so, like last night in class, one of the things we were talking about getting your hands up or whatever
Right.
is, you're
Covering.
protecting your center line
Yeah.
instead of protecting your right or your left.
Mhm.
Expecting, sure, what, 8 times out of 10 is going to be coming from the right, probably, but sometimes it's going to be coming from the left.
Right.
So, or left,
And,
I
yeah.
guess.
Yeah. And I think that some of those more dynamic drills, I do have a question about what Kyle's comment. But I
Yeah, he
think
says he's
that,
not a fan of Ippon Kumite.
yeah, and I don't know what that is. So,
That one
um,
sets, that's what it is.
oh, okay. Ipan. Okay. Um, yeah. And like I said, I think that there is a place for them, just as in my opinion, there's a place for forms, right?
Right.
It's that I think, as we've always advocated, there's not really good or bad. There's just like, what are your expectations and what are you trying to teach?
Mhm.
Because I think that the one steps are good, especially for distancing, right? If you're trying to get somebody comfortable with
Yeah.
distancing, for example, then you do need to slow things down. You need to slow things down. You need to essentially put them in a box where that's all they need to think about. And then they can think about the technique they're doing, the distancing that they need to achieve, their footwork, things like that, right? So out what they don't need to overwhelm their brain with is what technique am I going to have to do? When am I going to have to do it?
Mhm.
Where's this attack coming from? Because when you overload them as at the appropriate, when you overload someone at the inappropriate level, they it makes learning that much more difficult. And it's not as if you can't um, throw somebody into an MMA ring and just be like, "You're going to learn the hard way." Here,
Training by trauma. Yeah.
right, right, right. And they would learn eventually, right? They would learn. Um, and you wouldn't even have to show them a single technique, because they would learn eventually. But that's not what this is about. And like you had mentioned, it kind of defeats the purpose of going to a class then, right?
Right.
And having an instructor. And one of the things
Well,
that
that's
you
one of the
had,
things that you when you said it, I kind of
hmm
that connection was one thing that or actually two things. One thing is the context of what you're doing. Um, a lot of the folks that I know that are like, Ibn Kumite, one steps, useless.
right.
They're all people who have been, you know, hypocritically, that's what they did for decades, in some
Yeah.
cases, that's what they taught, right? And now they decide they don't like it because of,
Well, and
they
you
go
can
kind of
go,
point credit.
yeah.
But hang on. So, but one of the things that they forget is they've been training for 10, 15, 20,
hmm
30 years. So yeah, they don't need Ippons anymore. And
Right.
so they may be thinking, oh, I don't need those, or those are useless relative to themselves, but to the kid who is taking this for defense, right?
Right.
Has been hit and beat and whatever. Like getting them used to getting someone punching at them with a
Right.
nice framework of like, this is your safe space,
You're
as we like
safe.
to
Yep.
the social justice warriors like to talk about. Of like, okay, I know this guy is gonna or girl is going to punch me the same way every time, and that
Right.
can work with my footwork and stuff like that. You know, that's one context, but then the other context is you're doing this as part of a class to learn a martial art, or to learn a martial art, okay, to learn martial art, and it's a path, right? It's not
Right.
kick you into the deep end of the pool and hope you can
Right.
swim because you have to defend yourself. You know,
Right.
it's not true martial training where like you're going to be deployed in a month. So
Yeah.
you need to learn how to defend, you know, to
Right.
fight,
Right.
or you're going to be in the ring. You're somebody, you're taking a class, and this is the graduated step because
Yeah.
it's not a sprint, it's a marathon or a
Yeah.
long walk.
And I think that you can go too far the other direction as well. Because I remember I was taking a Tai Chi class, and as I was learning the first form, the instructor, he was like, "Yeah, we weren't allowed to do anything other than this first form for the first 2 years." And it's just like, well, you're just going to get people that are bored then. You
Right.
know? So, yeah, I would agree if Ipan Kumite.
Just
I
say
don't
one
know.
steps. Yeah.
Okay, one steps. Yeah.
A lot to wait.
So if you have to do one steps in every single class for like 5 years, your brain is going to bleed out your ears just from sheer boredom. You know? And again, this is the other difference about going to a class, having a coach, things like that, is that in part it's to keep you engaged, it's to keep you interested. Long gone is the days where you know, you walk into the dojo and it is it is only by their loving kindness that they choose to teach you, that they choose to honor you with their teachings, kind of thing, right? It's
Both
just like,
are brain droppings. Yeah.
right. So, you do need to keep people engaged, and you do need to coach them and help them, not just in the process of learning the techniques of your martial arts, but keeping them engaged and keep them
That
in
yeah,
the
that goes
process of
back to
learning.
our customer and student, you know,
Yes.
thread of like
Yes.
if you have you know, 10 people in your class, you know, how many of them are customers, how many of them are students? How many of those
Right.
people are there
You
to
probably
like,
have two students and eight
yeah,
customers.
to learn the guts,
Right.
the ancient technology that you're
That's
sharing
right.
with them. The other people are there to get a workout and do whatever.
Right.
And, you know, they got to get up and work the next day.
Right.
So, you know,
Right.
they can't,
They don't
you know,
want they don't want broken fingers in the morning, you
right.
know?
You know, and it's,
It's just the way it is. And
yeah, you know,
yeah, and I think for the modern world, again, when I know that for me, it's like you've got for people that are just looking for a workout, you know, there's the side benefits of martial arts. You get a good workout, you get a sense of community, you're learning something which is good for your brain development, all that
mhm,
stuff. Um, but there are a billion different options for people nowadays. They could just go to Planet
yeah,
Fitness. There's a boxing place right down the road from me that is just like bag punching. It doesn't do any boxing, right?
right.
Um, and there's just a lot of different ways that they can get that experience nowadays. And I think that people that are teaching martial artists have to realize that they have two jobs. One job is to be a martial artist. Job number two is to be a teacher. And I don't know, I don't think that either of those jobs is really less important than the other, right?
Yeah,
Because just as any kind of teacher, you could be a fantastically brilliant mathematician. But if you're not able to communicate that, if you're not able to teach the
right.
next generation those things, then one, you're going to lose it, and no one's going to want to sit through your class, right? So you're going to have
Yeah,
an empty dojo because even with precise and perfect technique, you might get a couple of students,
right.
but you won't get any customers.
Oh yeah, no, I've known lots of people that, I mean, you can argue, you know, the great martial artists, but they may not be
Right.
good teachers or,
Yeah.
good stewards of the system or whatever. But I
Right.
mean, but I think this really kind of comes back to, it touches on that whole, like, like, yeah, I mean, people are there to train in martial arts, and you're there as an instructor in the case of, someone who runs a class. You're
Hmm.
there as the instructor because you have this, in a perfect world, you have this art that you've been studying for quite a long time, and you want to share it,
Yeah.
and like, if you're like me, I want to share it because I learn more about it by sharing
Hmm.
it. And also, I
Hmm.
probably just wouldn't work out on my own because I'm just, inherently lazy. But you've got this, but then you have the flip side of that is there are instructors out there that are probably really good martial artists, but this is their job. They've decided to do that, and so it's like, well, okay, well, then you have to like balance that. Um, well, I want people in the school because I need to pay for the school.
Hmm.
But I also, want to, you know,
Right. I want a new generation of masters.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, not everybody's going to be a master.
Yeah.
So when I was doing learning how to scuba dive, way back after they invented water, uh, the guy who ran the class, it was kind of cool. We had done, I think we had done I did my basic diver course or whatever, and then I was going for advanced open water or whatever, and it was the same instructor. And I think we were like in the second class in, and he said, "I think you're going to be a dive instructor one of these days." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "I think you're going to be a dive instructor." And I was like, "Why do you think that?" He says, "Because I can tell you love diving." And yeah, I did. I truly love diving. And I was like, "Huh?" He goes, and it was kind of like karate now that when I look at it. He says, like, there's 15 people in this class. He goes, probably 10 of these people won't be diving in three or
Right.
4 months. And he said probably two of them will finish, we'll do the open water, or advanced open water, right?
Right.
He goes, and then maybe one will do like the first aid or, one of the other.
Yeah.
He says maybe two will go and get their dive master, and then maybe one will get their dive instructor. And so at the time, I didn't really put it in, but I was like, wow. He's like, I can tell you like it. I can tell you love it. Now, I eventually kind of moved onto the dive master track, and I was a dive master for a buddy of mine who was an instructor, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it quite enough to like go down the instructor track
Yeah.
or anything, but it was just like it's it's the same thing. It's like that.
Hmm.
And then as I became sort of a dive master, I was looking at it like, I also would like pull stuff that I knew from Navy dive school, which is like,
Oh,
to come up behind them and turn their air off while, they're doing their stuff, or like pull their mask off, because I could see that was important.
right.
But my instructor buddy was like, no, this is the curriculum because
Right.
they just want a whole lot of people diving.
Right.
And they hope that small subset goes on and goes, so it's like, it's probably, you know, uh, so to get it back to the dynamic
Hmm.
is like, it's important to like, so one of the things I did as a dive master was I would always like when I get in there, I would strive like getting your neutral buoyancy and do, and like when I would just dive, I would like take all my equipment off and put it back on, even when I was on a happy dive, just because I wanted to keep practicing those
Hmm.
basic techniques that you need to learn. And like, so as an instructor, like my students would, you know, but by the same token, I got people that don't really want to do that,
Yeah.
but they still have that love of diving. And, and here now, they still have that love of martial arts. But,
So,
where's the criteria?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I need to add that little layer of chaos with the dynamic entries like you're talking about
That's yeah,
to move them down the
exactly.
line.
But you need to do it in an appropriate and timely manner, right? It's all of these things that we learn along the way, going to different classes and going to
Mhm.
different styles and things like that. Like we've said, they're not
Yeah,
good or bad.
right.
They're appropriate or not appropriate given the skill level of the individual that you're trying to teach, given where a particular class of people are,
Yeah. I
where
mean, I know I've got instructor friends that, I mean, they've, like no one steps, I'm just, they're going to go in and they're going
Mhm.
to far more dynamic. They're coming
Yeah.
in like, I don't know, maybe
Yep.
day 3 and people are like trying to do throws and people are doing whatever. I think there's an eye to, again, context is everything, right? So it's like, well, sure, but they're having 2 or 3 or maybe 4 classes a week, maybe their classes are 2 hours long. They've got,
Right.
they don't have like, they're writing their own curriculum. They're doing their own
Right.
thing, and so and in a lot of them, you know, it's not a sink or swim kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
they've got a lot of students, and
Well, and I
the
know
program
people
is
that,
strong, and they can do whatever they
yeah,
want. And if they
yeah,
lose people, they don't care, right?
yeah.
So
Well, and
but then
I know
that
people that have thrown out the forms. They're like,
yeah,
forms are useless. Let's just throw them out. There's no point in doing them. And it's like, okay, I mean, I understand that sentiment. I really do. At the same time, it's again, it's just whether it's appropriate or not. I think that a form provides sort of a library or an encyclopedia of techniques that are incorporated in the system.
yeah,
That's why I like forums. I like them because they provide an avenue of solo practice that often people don't get otherwise. I mean, I've never done it before, but I would imagine it's difficult to solo practice like Krav Maga, for example, right? What do you
it does. You
what are you
just
gonna
look
do?
really silly,
Right, right. So
or
like,
no,
yeah, you
or
can.
any sillier than the rest of us in
Yeah.
pajamas. You know?
I mean, like boxing, you can, well, if you think of boxing, for example, shadow boxing, that's
Mm.
just doing a form. That's all that is.
Yeah,
And you do a a jab, jab, punch, punch, jab, jab. Like the combinations are really just little tiny forms. So yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
Like I say, I think that it's more of as like an instructor or even as an advanced student or something like that.
mm,
It's about the consideration of do I want to experiment with dynamic entry drills?
right,
Do I want to try something out?
right.
I
Well, like
think
the class last night
experimentation is
was.
huge.
Right. The class last night, I based it on our basics, right? Just like the first, I split out. So it was the punches, the blocks. Okay.
Hmm.
And so the first part of the class was just going through the, okay, we're punching, okay, now we're blocking. And and then the second half of the class was like, okay, now I'm taking that punch because what the conversation kind of came up with, it's a senior class. It's a bunch of black belts last night. So, and by a bunch, I mean 2 others. Um, so
Say a bunch, it sounds better.
yeah, two-thirds of the class were senior black. Um, anyway, it, it was kind of a thought experiment. We were banging stuff around. But when my senior student came up and he said something along the lines of like, uh, yeah, we never really talk about. In this case, we were talking about a video that we watched earlier by an instructor talking about doing why karate people don't do joint locks well.
Ah,
And I think I shared that with Kyle. Uh, and also it was Randall too, I think. Anyway, and what he was talking about was something that we've said in our system for a long time is like, yeah, when someone does like grabs your like joint locks and stuff like that don't exist in a vacuum. They're not like, someone grabs you, you go, ha, and the fight's over. Like, you have to do something kind of before to kind of soften them up usually. And
right.
you need to follow it up with something because, I don't care what
It's
anybody says. Very few
it's
people are
not
just
gonna
going to go
hold.
like, ow, ow, okay, I quit.
Right. Tap,
You
tap,
know,
tap, tap, tap.
so anyway, so he said like, yeah, we don't really ever talk about that. And I said, well, you're in luck tonight because now it's going to be, uh, you know, entries because I'm a big fan of parries and checks and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and stops. So, everything was like they're coming in and I got my stand-up bag and it was like you're either closing in or you're
Hmm.
backing up, or you're covering up and then you're closing in. And then everything was like you're doing a stop or you're doing a parry and a
Yeah.
catch. and a grab, and that way both hands are moving. And and then you do, the first one is a double punch, middle. So
Right.
you do whatever, and then you do 1, 2, 3.
Hmm.
You get 2 double punches, and then you're out or whatever. And then the same thing with the block was like, you come in for the block, and you parry, and you block, and then what do you do after that? So then it was, in this case, it
Right.
was, whatever it is, pull into an arm, drag into an arm bar
Right.
or whatever. It's, instead of, so,
But you
but to do
start
that,
simple and you
right.
build. Yeah.
And this is what actually Kyle and I were talking about this the other day about doing this online. And this came up was, being able to talk about that with people who already have martial arts experience is far
Hmm.
easier than having somebody brand new. And so, even in the real world, if there was an actual person there, like me getting a new student that, doesn't know how to punch or kick or whatever within the context of martial arts, right? I mean,
Hmm.
but
Right.
is to go like, okay, well, they're coming in and discussing ranging and whatever and getting both hands moving and all that other stuff is slower for sure, but simpler to say like, okay, they're going to step and punch, and you're going to step back
Right.
and block, and and maybe you'll get hit, or more importantly, okay, you need to punch them like you're going to hit them, or try and hit them,
Right.
so they have an expectation that that ranging is like they're not going way back here to block.
No.
They're staying
Yep.
there, or they get their distancing. All that stuff
Yeah.
kind of steps up.
Yeah.
So you can get to the dynamic stuff. So as you
Yeah.
move up, and you'll feel more comfortable. And again, so many times when we're sparring or something like that, and I've had many students go like, "Well, I'm doing the same block over and over again." Yes, you are. You know why?
Right.
Because it works.
Right. It's the wax on, wax off
I,
principle,
I,
right?
I have opened the whole thing. They're coming at you and punching,
Right.
go. And they end up,
Yeah. You isolate so that
yeah,
you can more effectively learn. That's
right,
really what it's about.
right.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I'm moving straight back, so I'm doing the same thing. Well, then, move to the side,
Right. Go to the
or give
side.
your
See,
give
and
yourself some
and
room.
and I think too that especially with senior students, like the allowing them the flexibility to experiment with that stuff, and not
Yeah,
saying, "Oh, no, you have to strictly follow the rules of this drill or whatever."
yeah,
No,
yeah. So again,
experiment, play.
yeah, last night in the class, as my
Hmm.
uh, students be like, well, it seems like it'd make more sense to do this. I'm like, sure, absolutely.
Hmm.
The ninja that I'm fighting is doing this,
Yeah,
you know, and the ninja you're fighting is doing something else.
right.
This is the context of this is the
Yeah,
technique we're doing. You're crashing in, you're blocking with an elbow, you're chopping down, and you're countering. You
yeah,
know, and then I would watch the video like we do like a couple three things, and then I'd watch them, and like sometimes I'd see them kind of come in and they do their hands different and maybe do like a stop kick or whatever, and then a punch over an elbow, and I'm like, fine, that because that's the flow.
right,
But they've been training for a very, very long time. And so
right.
my question to you,
Yeah,
not you, but you, the listener, the watcher, uh, and whoever's listening to this when we post it later as a podcast, is when did you feel like you could sort of freelance? When did you feel you could
right.
be a little more dynamic? When did you
Like
feel like
play.
you
Yeah.
could be like, yeah, I'm just kind of doing whatever, and I'm going to throw a lock
Hmm.
on, or I'm going to do a what, and they're punching, what, and with technique, not just necessarily like
Right,
somebody came at me and started punching. It's like,
right,
when did you feel you were able to have a dynamic entry and handle it,
right.
right? That would
Yeah,
be that would be the question that I would put to the karate caffeinators out there.
yeah.
To bring
And
that, I'm bringing that term back.
I guess another karate caffeinators. I like it. I guess another good one is, um, how do you know when somebody else is ready for that, right? Because as instructors,
That's a good
you
question.
have to see it in other people that you can say, you know what? I think Dan, let's try that dynamic entry stuff with him because he's got a feel for the basics now or whatever. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
I'm
Oh, what?
shockingly enough, we've
Yeah.
gone over.
Wow. How does
I don't
that
know.
happen?
I don't know
I don't
how,
know.
you know,
I don't know how that happens either. But I think we're there. Anyway, so excuse me, coffee. So this is one of the things that good. We've had some chit chatting with our
Mm-hmm.
close personal friends, Kyle and Randall. I don't know who else is over there. This is kind of interesting. What I would like to see,
Oh, wow.
because I'm looking on the metrics on the dashboard here. Again, we're trying to the tech team here at the massive Karate Cafe studio isn't fully up to speed, but it says we had 3 viewers, which I guess would be Randall, Kyle, and one mystery guest.
That might be me.
And I don't know, maybe I'm going to say
Um,
no. I'm going to say we touched 3 people.
that's right.
So
That's right.
so my question to you, Karate Caffeinators, are what else would you like to see from this sort of format? You know, how would you like to be better served by this? The voices of martial arts that we are. Uh, and then, of course, as always, comments. You can put them here and there, wherever the comment thing is relative to the screen. Or send us an email at karatecafe@gmail.com. And if you got any topics or suggestions or whatever, we will address them apace. Would you like to see this weekly, bi-weekly? Do you even care? Is anyone watching this after the fact? If not, we can just go back to we'll talk about it in secret. And you guys have no say
That's
in real
right.
time.
That's right.
This is a dynamic entry.
Yeah.
See, we're coming at you guys and we're saying stuff, and
That's
you're just
right. You got
not
no
even
idea
ready,
what's going to happen.
and you have to react on the fly. And if you
That's
don't,
right.
well, then you
Yeah.
don't. We're just trying to help. That was good topic, Dan. One of the things that I do notice, and I'm sure other people have too, is everything is tied together. Like no matter
Yeah.
what we talk about, it always kind of seems it comes back to a lot of the same framework,
Mhm.
and it's almost like it's a circle.
Yeah.
Kooky.
So
But
yeah, I would just say if people are interested in doing more research, check out videos of the Chi Sao from Wing Chun. How do you pronounce this karate drill? I can't remember.
oh,
Kate Damashi?
Kakedemashi.
Kake Damashi.
Kakedemashi.
Yeah.
If that's
So do
I'm
some,
not.
I mean, look at that, and it's more of a concept than anything else that can be applied to really. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And anyone who wants to pop in and say hi to my online class, DM me and we'll come in. We can talk. We can do some karate. We can do whatever. If you're in another system, I always enjoy having people drop in and work out. So if you're interested, ping me and we can get that going on. Dan, as always, it's great talking to you.
you too, Paul.
And we will talk to you all again much sooner than we did last time.
That's right. Hopefully.